What's up, everybody? New Beast and Billions podcast episode. I'm with Alex McGowan. What's up, man?
What's up, man? How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Doing good, doing good. Hey, one thing I will say is I'm so happy that the weather is actually nice. This
Yeah,
stuff we are dealing with earlier this week, man, I was not a fan of it.
yeah. Neither was I. And it was like super, super humid a couple of days ago. Like I went out to mow my yard and stuff, and it was just like you would have thought I stepped out of a steam sauna. Like my shirt's soaked, and I was
Yeah,
just like, I didn't even work too hard.
yeah, that happened to me. So I took so after I moved up to Kansas City, so I moved back up there early January, I think like the 13th or something like that. Anyways, though, I tried finding a house up there, it didn't work out. So I'm living in an apartment complex in the meantime, but I got two big dogs, two
Uh-huh.
German Shepherds. So I have to take them out to go to the bathroom. But last week, it was so humid last week. Like I literally walked maybe 50 feet. It literally looked like I just got done running like 4 or 5 miles with how much I was sweating.
Yeah, for real. It was ridiculous. And then obviously, I mean, I guess it's good if you're trying to cut some weight, but
I
so you actually recently had a fight um, in Wichita. Did that fight go as expected, as you planned?
Yeah, he was the we knew he was going to be tough. Especially him coming off the win that he was coming off of. I know the guy who he beat, and Ryan Hayes, like he has about a 500 record. However, his record doesn't speak for how good he is.
Right.
So um so we knew he'd be very confident, but yeah, he was so tough. But everything like game plan wise, it was just about expected. So Zach and I, we were pretty happy and satisfied with my performance and such. So
Yeah, I mean, as long as you get the job done, like I think ultimately, especially when you're getting into a fist fight, it's not always going to be pretty.
right,
Yeah, a fist fight is a fist fight, and as I think is at the end of the day, as long as you get the job done, that's more important than anything.
yeah, that's exactly actually what Zach told me because right after the fight was done, I was still in the cage and I walked up to him and he could tell that I was kind of a little frustrated because there were some things I wanted to do and exploit that I just wasn't able to in the fight. And he did a really good job out calming me down. He's like, hey man, it's like, dude, enjoy the moment. You got the victory. You're not injured or anything like that. So but yeah, it is some lessons learned and some stuff to be able to take from the fight and improve on and such. So
Yeah, and I think that's also another thing. As long as if you can learn from a win, I think that's the biggest thing because a lot of people learn from losses, and that's good to learn from losses. But at the same time, like I always say this in every podcast, it seems like, but fighting's so different. Like I play football. If we suck one year, we just get them next year. Record refreshes, we're 0-0 in August. Or even if we drop a game, okay, just get them next week. Like we have 13 weeks to, figure it out and make a bowl game or whatever, right? But in fighting, I think this is why I love it so much. It's all in, all nothing. If you're in or you're out. If you half-ass it, then you're not gonna make it really anywhere. And at the same time, a couple of losses determine a lot. Like,
right,
that could be the deciding factor between you getting signed and another guy getting signed to the UFC, of course.
right. Yeah, man. Yeah, I think that's one of the things why I got so drawn into fighting because it's all about ownership. Like at
Yeah.
the end of the day, yeah, it's a me sport, and yes, it's a team sport in certain perspectives. But when you're in there, it's all on you.
Yeah.
If you lose and you made a bad decision, it's not like you can blame a teammate, blame a coach, or anything like that. It's you have to own it yourself. So yeah, I think that's one of the things of why I love fighting so much because it's the one few things in my opinion, in our lives that we actually have absolute control of,
Yeah.
versus just a bunch of different other intangibles and variables and such.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I grew up playing football, and I'm recently, like just a couple of years ago, got really into fighting. And there's a few things that really drew me in. First of all, I play quarterback, so I have 10 other dudes I'm responsible for, and if they don't do their job, then they're fucking my life up. Like I can't do my job properly, right? And so in fighting, you have your training partners, right? And you're ultimately going to be a product of your training partners in the long run. But even Khabib said, you can sit there and give great corner advice. You can sit there and tell them blueprints on how to, stand up, get back to your feet, you know, combinations that should be thrown. But at the end of the day, the only person that can change it is the guy who's inside the cage. And
Yeah.
you can't blame anybody else. If someone else messes up, you can't use that as an excuse. You have to hold yourself accountable. You have to, you can't skip a meal because then you're going to miss weight. And you got to drink a lot of water. If you skip a training session, that could very well be, a difference between a win and a loss. There's just so many different things, and it's like so in depth, and it's like you have to dig deep. And more importantly, this is the biggest thing with a fight. You're scheduled for 5 5s if you're main eventing, or 15 minutes for most people. But you could be up 2 rounds to none, or you could be down or to 0-2, or you can be 1-1, and at any moment the fight could be over. And that's really big because in football, like, we have 4 quarters regardless of if we're getting smoked by 50 or it's hair and hair. And I know, okay, I have 15 minutes to score this amount of points in order to win. But with a fight, I just feel like it's like playoff hockey, where next goal wins. And that's like gives you a different kind of adrenaline, and it just makes you feel different.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. So that's one of the things of that's cool. So I was listening to a podcast between Dustin Poirier and Teddy Atlas. So Teddy Atlas was talking about just fighters and fighting in general, and it's one of those things that, like what you're talking about, like it's 15 minutes for us to be able to make that difference, or that 25 minutes to be able to make that difference, be able to make life fair. But you're absolutely right with things can change in such a split second. I mean, especially you really don't, unless if the commission's allowing open scoring. Actually, I take that back. Promotions are the ones that can choose if they can do open scoring systems. So like the Kansas State Athletic Commission, they do allow it if the promotion so chooses to. But the UFC doesn't. And this most recent event that we saw with Holly Holm, I thought she won the fight.
For sure.
But yeah, but yet the judges gave the other girl 3 rounds. I was so blown away. But it goes exactly what you're talking about. You just really, you never know that if you're up or down. Like you can be completely dominating, and but that's one of the cool things with fighting is, especially those explosive people out there, like your Charles Oliveira's and such, that may have that huge difference in a split second of you're getting choked out, your arm ripped off, or just getting knocked out and such. So
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Charles Oliveira, because he's like the one that you instantly think about. Like, you can't tell me watching that Justin Gaethje fight, you're like, all right, this is exactly what we thought. Justin Gaethje's gonna punch a hole through his head, you
yeah,
know? Or even Dustin Poirier, Dustin's gonna punch a hole through his head too. He's not gonna make it. Or again, Michael Chandler, like his last 3 fights, the first round, you're like, this guy's gonna get his lights put out. And
yeah,
especially Gaethje, like Gaethje, I think hit him like 4 times, and 2 of them put him down like bad, you know. And then next thing you know, he drops Gaethje, and now he's on his back, and that's the worst place you could be. Charles Oliveira is him on your back. That's just the worst
yeah.
place you could possibly be in.
Yeah, well, that's crazy about like the Chandler fight. That was so cool about it. So I forget who I was talking to the other day about it, but we were talking about Charles Oliveira because Gaethje and Poirier both had their opportunities to be able to potentially finish those fights
Right.
against him, but because they had him badly hurt, they dropped him, but they were not willing to engage him on the ground. Chandler was the only guy I have seen in recent history that was, okay, I knocked you down. Oh, you want to play guard? All right, I'll climb right in there. And that's one thing that you got to give mad respect for that guy of going straight into his. I mean, right into his best part of his game and such. I think Chandler's probably the closest one that was to actually beating him.
Right.
And he kind of just got caught off guard or overconfident and just got caught with his hands down. So
Yeah, I think it's unique you brought up Michael Chandler, because I literally have his shirt dog pulled up, and he's never been submitted. And
yeah,
and the thing is you think of him as a knockout artist, but he has 11 knockouts and 7 submissions. Like, he submits a lot of dudes.
yeah,
And So I think, I don't know. I just don't think. I think that Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira fight needs to happen again. And because if you go back and watch that first round, he had Charles Oliveira, like his head was like on the mat, like his cheek was on the mat, and he was just like beating him up. That fight could have been stopped. Normally, when you see someone in a fetal position like that, they're done. Like that's over with. But and that just like gives you hope too, because it's like I'll even revert it to Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, where Conor. A lot of people say that was a 10-8 round. I don't personally think so. I think Conor was busy on bottom enough, busy enough to not get 10-8'd that round. And obviously the leg break is awful. You don't ever want to see anyone break their leg like that. But uh, you know, Conor is also the kind of guy that it takes one punch and your lights are out all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, and especially with his boxing credentials, I mean, 10 rounds with Floyd Mayweather, bar for bar. I think Teddy Atlas said he had him winning the first 5 rounds or something like that. Like, winning the fight against Floyd Mayweather, you don't just do that. Like Floyd Mayweather's like amazing.
Yeah, yeah, he's one of the best of all time in boxing. Yeah, so speaking of like Conor McGregor's skills, I personally don't think he's washed up. I know a lot of people are counting him
Yeah.
out. He's still in the prime of his career, and losing to Khabib, then losing to Poirier. Yeah, he went out there and beat Cowboy, but styles make fights at the end of the day. Conor style is the absolutely best matchup, or going against Cowboy, that was the best matchup because he's a slow starter. Connor's a fast starter. So we kind of had a feeling the way that was going to play out. But I mean, hell, even in the second Poirier fight, he was piecing Dustin up with his boxing.
Yeah.
Uh, he just didn't take into account for the kicks that Dustin was going to put into play, and that was the real big difference maker. Was the kicks that started keeping him as a stabilized target because he went with a more boxing centric approach, and he just ended up getting caught. But yeah, Conor, he's definitely not washed up, and I truly think that the difference between Conor and a lot of the guys who Charles has fought, because there's a very realistic opportunity that he could very well be fighting Charles next for the title. And I think he actually has a legitimate shot at winning it because how his accuracy with the shots, in my opinion, is what separates him the most.
Yeah.
Anybody can get knocked down in MMA, but if you look at how accurate he is with his shots and the timing of his shots, that's the real big difference maker that separates him from a lot of different guys. And that could very well be the difference maker of him potentially finishing a guy like Charles Oliveira.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because there's a lot of hot takes on that. And personally, this is exactly what I think. Watching Charles Oliveira's fights, we know he's as hittable as they come.
Yeah.
Clearly, you don't get dropped 2 times in each of your fights for no reason. You're very hittable. But at the same time, he has a 10 count because he just lays on his back. Nobody wants to play guard with him. So even if he does get wobbled, nobody, like I guess Michael Chandler's the only one. But those last 2 fights, nobody wants to play guard with that guy. And fair play, I wouldn't want to play guard with him either.
Right.
But the thing about Conor is, I feel like if he hits you, you're gonna go out. Like Conor's not gonna play games, and this is the difference. I thought Gaethje was gonna win, but I had stipulations to it. I put my money on Gaethje. Don't get this twisted, but this is what I thought. If Gaethje fought like he fought Tony Ferguson, calculated, finding your shots, and not over like he was throwing so hard he whiffed and took a knee. Like
Yeah.
you're not gonna win like that. And I think power wise. Well, I mean, I guess Dustin did say that Conor's the hardest he's ever been hit, and he's fought in both of them. So, power-wise, Conor probably has the edge. Speed-wise, definitely has the edge. But this is the most important thing: he finds his shots. He's not going to go in there throwing looping hooks and overhands. He's going to fight behind his jab and hit you with his left hand. And I think if Gaethje would have done that, then Charles would have been out cold. And the thing about Gaethje is he's not going to get taken down.
Yeah.
But he's been taken down once or twice by Khabib, and that's it in his whole life.
Well, he got taken down by Chandler, but popped right back up. It was a scramble. I don't know if they
Yeah,
actually counted that as a true takedown
no,
because the scramble he popped right back up. But other than that, yeah, Khabib's the only guy that's ever been able to control him on the ground.
right.
Um, Funny story about Gaethje. There's a guy who I used to train with named Tyler Stinson. He was roommates with Gaethje long time ago. So he was kind of telling me the reason why Gaethje fights the way he fights, and he was like, "That guy is blinder than shit." So that's why he's kind of always clinched up, covering up, and then he waits until you know that he's in range, and that's why he's able to throw, or why he throws the way he throws. Is I mean,
Yeah.
he doesn't have that good depth perception. But same thing with Oliveira. I mean, that's part of the reason why he's so hittable too, and he's been open about that over the last year of him. Like that's why I walk out to my fights sometimes wearing my glasses because I can't see a damn thing. But man, dude, I'm been so impressed with Charles Oliveira. He's becoming one of my favorite guys to watch over the years. Seeing him not just quitting, because I remember watching him whenever he fought Cub Swanson, and Frank Yeager and all that kind of stuff. And he kind of break and quit in those fights, and then he just found his stride, and it's truly awesome seeing it. So
Yeah, I agree. Um, I gotta say, I didn't think he was going to win any of his last three fights. I've kind of been a doubter in that sense, but I think what really changed my mind is when he put Gaethje down. He didn't take him down; he hit him and put him down. And I've seen Gaethje hit the deck a few times, not many. I mean, I think Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier are the only times he's hit the deck. Um, yeah, and that's really impressive because Gaethje is durable and tough.
yeah,
So, what'd you make of the Rose fight then?
I fell asleep.
Yeah, me too. I was gonna say I wasn't conscious to remember.
Yeah. I woke up a couple times. I mean that there's so many takes you can have off of that. I mean, I get what Rose was trying to do, especially with her. I mean, that was such a big moment that she lost in that first fight against her, Carla. So I kind of felt like that she was playing too much of that. It was the same fight versus treating it as a brand new fight because it was such a huge time difference between the last time that they fought that neither one of them are the same fighter anymore.
Right.
So it in one way you can look at it, it's not truly a rematch after that long of a time because they've had so many improvements, they've matured and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, the truth is that Rose was worried about the takedown, and that kind of thing lives rent free when you get dominated like that.
yeah.
Um, and obviously Rose isn't the best wrestler, but at the same time, I was impressed. She got taken down twice and just got right back it up, hit a nice whip, and flipped around. It was good. Um, but I think at the end of the day, if she were to try to fight her fight, then she would end up on her back and lose.
Well, I don't think so, to be honest with you. I think she's improved good enough that she would be able to get back up to her feet. Because even the times when Carla did take her down, she was able to pop up back to her feet. And one thing that I wish she would have done earlier on, which I think she did in the fourth round, she actually took Carla down.
Yeah,
If she's making Carla think about the takedown now, that's one more thing she has to worry about than trying to worry about getting her own takedown. And that would have allowed Carla to, or excuse me, Rose to be able to just start piecing her up. So
yeah, and I feel like you always like sit on the sidelines and say, well, if I was fighting a wrestler, then this is how I would fight him. But at the same time, I feel like um Carla has a fairly wide stance, and I would start kicking legs and throwing uppercuts and knees, so
yeah,
you're not shooting, and have your back. You're not necessarily going to shoot when you're backing up. Like it's just physics do not work like that.
right.
You're not going to generate enough power to get a takedown at that level. Maybe on the regional scene, you're because they're all coming together. But when you're in the big leagues, especially at that level, when you're fighting for a world championship, it's a game of inches, and you need every bit of power that you can generate. And it wouldn't have happened. I just feel like, and then honestly feel like Cub, or not Cub Swanson, but Rose's corner was kind of doing her a disservice too, making her think she was winning the fight. It's like, you're not winning the. I mean, I guess you could have won the fight because nothing happened.
Yeah,
Like literally nothing happened. Like there was a round where 2 punches were thrown.
yeah, yeah. What was
So
it like, second round or something like
yeah,
that?
exactly. So, at the same time, it's like that fight was just awful, and I think Rose's best hope of getting a belt back is Carla losing to someone else like Joanna, Jessica Andrade, those kinds of people, because you're not fighting a third time, especially after a fight like that.
Well, she's one of Dana's favorites, so I think there is that possibility of like an immediate rematch. But I mean, right now we got the rematch between Joanna and
Zhang Wei Li.
yes, I mean that man, I'm super excited for that one. But that may well determine who fights Carla next. So
Yeah.
it's cool seeing women's MMA evolve the way how it has, especially how fast it has. Because when Ronda Rousey first approached into the sport, or I would really say helped really catapult women's MMA into the mainstream media, I kind of feel like women's MMA at that time was kind of like the old school UFC that was a lot of one dimensional female fighters versus being these well-rounded mixed martial arts. Like you see how long it's taken the males kind of become this well-rounded mixed martial arts game.
Yeah.
The females have quickly caught back up and they put on some of the most entertaining fights. And in my opinion, I actually like watching some of the women fight a little bit more because they're just a little bit more technical than some of the male guys. Because some of the male guys, that testosterone's going, they're just start throwing punches, technique out the window. But the females, they say so technical, and it's fun to watch them.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to the point where I can't watch fights with like in a public setting.
Yeah,
Does not work for me. Like even like my family, like I'm very selective on who I watch a fight with, because people just don't get it. Kind of like the stigma of like, oh, these girls are just fiddle fucking around, whatever. But like if you actually watch and understand, they're extremely scrappy and they're extremely technical. Like, you know, if I was going to show you a fight where I'm like, this is what MMA is, I would go to Joanna and Zhang Wei Li. That
yeah,
fight, that's a fight of what MMA is. That fight would get anybody who has hope of coming to the UFC and being a fan. That's the fight.
yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, dude, yeah, that fight. I just remember watching that one live. Like I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. Oh man, that was so exciting watching that.
It was. It was just you get and you almost start to feel like you start getting adrenaline, like you're just like, oh, come on, slip, jab, jab,
Yeah,
jab. Yeah, it's crazy how invested you get. Like I'm like that with Colby Covington. He had I would say, pretty easy night out last fight. He dominated. Um, but the Usman fights, those are some great fights too.
yeah, yeah. And what's cool is actually like that rivalry between both of them. It's cool seeing Usman playing the bigger guy and giving the respect that
Yeah.
Colby does deserve. I don't really care for his trash talking. I think he gets a little bit
Neither
too
do I.
personal for me. Zach Cummins and I were joking around about that in the gym too. Some of the other guys after a sparring session, we're sitting and telling them, was like, in my opinion, it's like if you want to trash talk, by all means, keep it pointed at me, but don't involve the family, wife, daughter, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's
Full
the
line, but man, if Usman was not champion, Colby would be it right now.
yeah. Colby's extremely dominant, and I don't understand how he's not in the pound for pound rankings. I think that just shows how dumb those are, because Colby Covington is one of the best fighters in the world right now,
Yeah,
um, for sure, not a question asked. And the Dustin Poirier fight is going to be a good one if it happens.
that's. I wonder if it is because he's still going through his
Lawsuit.
the lawsuit for the CET against Masvidal. So, because it's one of those things that if he wants to win that lawsuit, he shouldn't be fighting. But if he
Right.
fights, that lawsuit's going to get dropped right away.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, what's your take on that whole thing? I personally think you had 25 minutes to do it. to do whatever you wanted, you couldn't do it. And I think it's also kind of bitch made to like wear a hoodie and glasses and a doctor's mask and sneak him. Like
Yeah.
it's one thing if I see you in the street and you see me and like we've both agreed that we're gonna fight if we see each other. But the sneaking, don't agree with, especially after you've literally a couple weeks before that got your ass handed to you.
Yeah, I mean, from the professional side, I 100% agree with you. However, though, with Masvidal's upbringing, I mean,
True.
we what do you expect from him? I mean, he said that like, "Hey, on site, if I see you, I'm gonna deck you in the face." And I mean, he lived up to his word. So it's one of those things I can't really fault Masvidal for doing what he did at all.
Right.
Uh, um, but it just shows you that he is who he says he is versus some of those other guys that put on that persona and such. And Colby, he was saying that Masvidal isn't about that life and shows you that he is. But no, I do agree with you that he had the 25 minutes. It should have been left at that, but that's what happens when you get a little bit too personal. So I mean, the
Yeah.
same like Khabib and Conor, those guys will never ever be friends. I don't ever see them, even as old men, they'll probably like see each other in wheelchairs and still try to duke it out.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was actually talking about that with someone the other day about like you when you take like Russians are scary. Like they're just different. There's just something about them that's just different. They have screws loose and they're like nobody unscrews them. Like they just come loose.
Yeah,
Like they're just crazy. And they take shit super serious.
yeah,
And it's because of they have to deal with communism, all of this other stuff that they have to deal with. So you can't really fault them. But you talk about someone's family like Connor did, and I love Connor and I love Colby, but there's a fine line. 2016 Connor, who the fuck is that guy? That's the trash talking that is gonna make you the big bucks. Talking about I guess Connor didn't really insult Dustin like about his family or anything.
he did
Uh,
later on third fight. That third fight he did.
the third fight, yeah, true. True. But I don't I mean it's even still it's not like Colby Covington's extent, you
Yeah,
know. Like that's just so far beyond to that. Like sometimes Colby's hilarious. Like his names like Cumshot Shemaev's hilarious, you know. Like some of his trash talk's hilarious, but when it comes to like Dustin Poirier and Masvidal, really the only two he really crosses lines with, and I
yeah.
guess Usman a little bit talking about his dad, but those guys, he's other than that, he's like I feel like he's pretty good, but Connor, um, talking about Khabib in the way and that way, and then Dustin in the third, that's just not what's, I guess some people like that, and it's like funny to an extent, but there's just lines, and
Yeah.
and especially throwing a dolly through a bus and stuff like you just can't piss off someone like that, and then especially someone like Khabib, where he's known he's never lost a round before, you know, and so you kind of you can't I mean I would be reluctant to piss someone like that off, like for anyone else, yeah, sure, poke at him, piss him off, whatever. It worked with Aldo, but Khabib, I don't think it'd work.
Yeah. So, dude, speaking of Russians, like how crazy they were, there's I was deployed over in Afghanistan back like 2012, and I remember I was at this fob and had like a small little roadway, but it was so small that they didn't have any lights on at all. So pilots, whenever they land, they'd have to use their night vision goggles and such. Anyways, though, so there was a lot of contracted pilots at that time. Some of them were Russian, and those guys, I remember I had to go to the TMC. I was trying to get some Advil for my headache I had, and there was a Russian pilot that was over there because he crash landed, and like he's bleeding from his fucking head, right? I'm all like, "Hey, man, like you're bleeding from your head." He's like, "Red paint." I'm like, "No, no, dude, it's not red paint." And he just like gets up and walks off. I'm like, "You fucking crazy guy!" And like the Polish, all I would say, not just Russians, those Eastern Europeans, because the Polish over there, obviously in deployed environment, we're not allowed to drink, right? The Polish, zero fucks to give. Like I remember I was like sitting down in this tent and this Polish guy walks over to me, just like, "You watch weapon," throws his weapon at me and like literally goes outside and starts drinking vodka. I'm all like, bro, like this place literally was just attacked yesterday, and you're drinking vodka. Like, what the fuck,
Yeah,
dude? They're crazy. Yeah, yeah. Those guys, like, I will never. If I ever fight a Russian or Eastern European guy, like, dude, I'm not going to trash talk them.
nope. Yeah, I'm gonna be respectful as hell. It's just one of those things, there's just some people you don't really want to fuck with, and I think Russians and those kinds of guys, Polish people, yeah, and their accent too. Like, I'm gonna kill you, brother, I'm gonna kill you. I
Yeah,
smash you, I smash you. It's like, oh my gosh, I would not want to mess with that.
there's a comedy skit. I forget the guy's name. I'll send you the little skit. It's so funny because I had this guy. He's gonna talk about like accents and like which accents are trusting and which ones are not. So he was all like, whenever he hears someone speaking like a French accent, you automatically think like seduction. And
Mhm.
then, unfortunately, you think of, especially with Hollywood and such, you hear that Arab accent, you think like, oh shit, something's about to go crazy. But then he's all like, I've never heard a more scarier accent than the Russians, especially when they're speaking English with that accent. You think that they're probably like a big drug crime lord, blah blah blah. And then he's like, and then next you know, this Russian starts speaking Russian. He's like, I'm totally fine. I'm totally cool.
Yeah,
Uh, dude, yeah, yeah, I'll send you. It's pretty hilarious.
yeah. I mean that there's true because accents like even Connor, like Connor would not be the star he was if he had a whitewashed accent and he had no Irish accent. Like
Yeah,
Connor's accent made him what he is.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. He was that international star that the UFC's been looking for a long, long time. I mean, it's kind of like why George St. Pierre was so popular because he had that Canadian French accent and such. But yeah, yeah. Connor, yeah, he had that it factor because that accent, it was something that people were just drawn to because it's not something that you, especially within the Americas, we're always kind of drawn to something from the outside that intrigues us, and that was that it factor. It's like, oh, you got this Irish guy. He talks that part of the Irish. He definitely looks it, and he's just going there knocking dudes out. So
Yeah. And I think Connor, I don't think there'll ever be a Conor McGregor superstar like that again. Just because when you think about it, um, he got, he was selling out arenas with fans from Ireland.
yeah,
It costs a fortune to come from Ireland to here and buy a ticket. Conor McGregor tickets. I grew up in Vegas,
yeah,
and so um, last year when he was gonna fight Dustin, no, or Dustin the third time in
yeah.
July, I was like, oh, I'm gonna look at these tickets. They're like a couple $1,000s.
I
You know,
believe it.
like you're not going there for cheap, and so you know it's a whole ball and chain. And if you could you sell out an arena with fans from Ireland, that's just a testament to how big you really are.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that he definitely solidified his name in the sport for good. And the one thing I really wish he got a lot more credit for, which I think Frank Yeager was like the first guy to really acknowledge that he was the cause of it, was he is the reason why a lot more fighters started getting increased pay, especially from the UFC. The sponsorship deal, that's a whole nother separate subject. But as far as getting paid from the UFC, he is the reason why. But he's also the reason why, in my opinion, the UFC will never invest as heavily in promoting a guy as they did with Conor, because Conor's name became bigger than the UFC. And like when he was going to fight Eddie Alvarez for the UFC title, negotiations were held up for a long, long time because he wanted more. And then same thing to fight Khabib. He was like, hey, if I'm gonna fight, like, fuck the money, like give me a few million, I'm good. But he's like, I actually want ownership in the UFC and such. And people, they had to give in at some point in time because he's just that big of a name and he sells that much that they have to give that leeway to him. But because that lawsuit, that I don't know if you're up to date with that lawsuit that's going on with the UFC. This
But
has been dating back from like 2012, 2010 or something like that. It's been ongoing for a long, long time.
I actually know nothing about it.
So I forget the guys who are a part of this one. It might be like Randy Couture. There's like three or four different ones going on at the same time. I think this one has like Randy Couture, Evan Tanner, like old school UFC
Right.
guys, right?
Old school.
But the UFC, they did lose some steam in the courts, because they had to release like the revenue versus profit ratio to the general public. And I want to say 2016 was probably the only year that they paid out the highest percent of that revenue to the fighters, and even then it was like at 18% of the revenue that was coming. Majority of the time it's been floating in between from 10 to like 16% of the revenue is used to pay the fighters. The rest of it the UFC keeps itself. But and part of that lawsuit though was that they were claiming that the UFC is a monopoly. We all know it is a monopoly. I mean, they are the premier league, but they do such a good job of staying or going saying that they're not a monopoly because they let certain talent go away. Like say Roy McDonald, that was a huge shocker to the world MMA community of letting a top, I think it was top three at the time when they released him. But and they allowed him to go to these other organizations. Same thing with like that trade with Demetrius Johnson to ONE FC and bringing over Ben Askren. Because skill wise, it didn't make any sense whatsoever. Especially for how talented Mighty Mouse is, in my opinion, the GOAT. But they allowed him to go because he wasn't a draw. And that allowed them to be able to say in the courts of like, hey, we don't have a monopoly. You see, we don't have all the top level talent. This organization has this person, et cetera, et cetera. They did a really good job of allowing certain top level talent to go away because they weren't marketable. But those marketable guys, they're for sure holding on to. I mean, look at Robbie Lawler. He's before fighting Nick Diaz, he was like on a 5 or 6 fight losing streak. And I absolutely love Robbie Lawler.
Same.
But he's not that top level talent anymore that he used to be, but he's still entertaining and still a big enough name that they don't want to allow any other organization to profit off of his name.
Yes.
So kind of same thing with George St. Pierre. George St. Pierre's been retired. He got offered to do a exhibition boxing match against Oscar De La Hoya. UFC shut that down immediately because they don't want to allow other people to make money off of them. And but that kind of goes into back in tying into the Conor McGregor deal of like his superstardom. I think that was one of the reasons why he was able to push for that Floyd Mayweather fight was because his name was actually bigger than the UFC, and the UFC had to give in. And I think that's part of the reason why that Dana White's so reluctant of allowing other guys to try to do that same thing, like Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury. I think Tyson will absolutely destroy Francis Ngannou pretty easily, but they don't want to allow other fighters to go off and start allowing other people to be able to make money off their names.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think fighters should be getting paid a little more.
Yeah.
But I think I also like Sean O'Malley's take on it.
Yeah.
Because he's like, they've given me the platform to make money through sponsorships. They're the reason why I'm driving this Lamborghini. And if they didn't give me this opportunity, they didn't give me the opportunity, like the fame, give me the platform, then I wouldn't be here right now. So I also can't be mad at them for not paying me a lot, because they've given me the platform. But in the same sentence, I also feel like it makes sense in the same way, because the more tickets you sell, the more of a draw you are, the more money you make, right? And so if you self-promote yourself and you market yourself in the right ways, you cut promos like Michael Chandler, then you're going to make more money. But it's just touchy because, at the same time, I had this talk with Elle Wagman, and I told her, I was like, I think football players are overpaid too. Like, there's no reason a quarterback should be making 150 million and the left tackle's making 40 million. It just shouldn't work like that. Like, coming from a quarterback, like if that left tackle doesn't do his job, then I'm fucked. And if that left tackle doesn't do his job, then I'm not who I am. Tom Brady, biggest Tom Brady lover, have his water bottle. But if he didn't have the offensive line he does and the talent around him, Tom Brady would not have 7 rings right now. Tom Brady would not be Tom Brady. So the fact that he's getting paid so much money, but I think everyone should get paid an even amount of money across like team sports like that. But fighting's a little different because it's not a team sport. You cut 10% to your coach or whatever, and then you cut 10% or 25%, how much ever you cut to your management, and then everything else, and then you got to pay taxes. And then there's so
Yeah.
many different things. Um, you know, I just feel like fighting, and it's a lot more. I mean, all sports have injuries. All sports you're gonna get injured at some point. But fighting, you're taking so much damage. You're actually putting your body on the line. It's the most grueling sport there is, and bar none. I mean, there's no comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every single fight, majority of the fighters go into injured. I mean, hell, my most recent fight, I never went to the doctor to get it confirmed, but I'm fairly certain I had torn cartilage in my rib. I was working some wall wrestling with one of the guys, and I had like a sharp pain shoot through my rib. This is like a month prior out to my fight, so I was like, "Oh, I got plenty of time to rest." Was smart training and all that kind of stuff, and it wasn't until 2 weeks before my fight I was there for a jiu-jitsu class, and we were just working single legs, just drilling, not even actually like resistance or anything. And as my butt hit the ground during the drill, I just felt my entire rib cage just sharp pain
Mhm.
once again. And so I told Zach, like, hey, like, had a pain through my rib cage. Like, I'm gonna take it a little bit easy and stuff. I did the MMA class afterwards, and we did all striking. Like, I kind of felt it during that. Wasn't too bad, um, but it was definitely noticeable. Like, even a couple of Saturdays, I was going with a hard sparring session. I was very reluctant on like even to do certain things I wanted to do during the sparring session because I was like, well, I'm afraid to compromise my rib and get hit in it and such. Fortunately, obviously, it didn't affect me in my fight. I ended up getting they count it as a verbal submission, but it should be recorded as a knockout because he went face first into the ground with a cut on his forehead. Um, but it didn't affect me at all during the fight. But then the week afterwards, Zach kind of re-aggravated it. He hit me with a good body shot. It just pretty much took the soul out of my body. But I'm still dealing with that rib injury. And that's the thing with fighting though, is when opportunities come up, it's not like that we can sit there and say, no, I got a rib injury, keep this opportunity for me. No, you have to jump on it. And a lot of guys will go into a fight injured. And that's one of the, and we're not really compensated medically, unlike football players. Football players at the highest level, all their medical bills are paid for. They're compensated. They're still getting that salary. If we get injured in a fight, we don't make money. So
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I think obviously healthcare is fair, just like any profession. Now, I think the people saying lifelong healthcare, that's a little ridiculous because if you think about any job, once you retire or once you quit that job, if you get cut, you get fired, you don't get those benefits anymore.
yeah,
So I think, but while you're on contract within the UFC, I think that you should get healthcare. But I also think they're going in that direction with the PI. Like if you if you're a UFC fighter and you go to the PI, there's physical therapists there, there's doctors there, and so I feel like they're kind of moving that direction. But at the same time, we're kind of halting. But I think eventually it'll get there.
yeah. Well, Dana White said something within the last year that they had, or they're working on some type of healthcare plan for all their fighters. The one thing I would personally like to see is, because I agree with you, once when you're done fighting and you're no longer with that organization, why should they have to pay for your health insurance? However, though, I think what would be nice, what the UFC would do is, if it's something that's cognitive related, to
Yeah,
still pay for that, because I mean that's the big damage that you got to really worry about. People can then walk around with crutches or in a wheelchair and figure life out, but if you don't have a brain to be able to use, or you're constantly start getting those headaches, like it's those kind of medical bills get real expensive, because the human mind, it's such an amazing thing that we still really don't know a lot about it. So
yeah.
I mean, the only time that they can really even do any studies on CET is
When you,
after the athlete's dead.
right.
So that's the sad part about fighting. And that's one thing that I started actually doing early on in my career, was listening to a lot of the older fighters on their podcasts and listen to the way how they were trained. And they always said, I wish I didn't spar as hard early on in my career. I think I would have had a longer career. So I started doing that myself. The only time I even do like true hard sparring is whenever I have a fight coming up. Other than that, everything's very technical, light. Obviously, wrestling and jiu-jitsu I'll still go hard with, but anything to the head, I mean, hell, there's even sometimes I won't even spar at all if I don't have a fight coming up, just because I don't want to take that cognitive damage.
Right. Yeah, I think, and if you think about it, we're also holding up the UFC to a super high standard for only being like 20 something years old. Like if
Yeah,
you think about it, we're still super young. Like the UFC is still a super young sport. Like there's no way that the kinks are all going to be worked out, in 25 years, It took football's been around for like 50 something, 60 years almost, you know.
yeah,
Where they've been around, they've been able to, kind of work it out. But you look at football 25 years in and tell me, I think the UFC's done a way better job. There's way better technology. There's way better, um, like the UFC is definitely moving in the right direction, but that's also something to consider when, they were just in the hole like 10, 12 couple of years ago, if you think about it, right? Like
yeah,
they're just now really making money. And I think even with like as recent as quarantine, when everyone started going to quarantine, you could either watch fucking cartoons or watch a fight, and most people are going to watch a fight.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Dana said it, fighting's in our DNA. People are drawn to violence. I don't know how many times that I've had a friend be like, "Oh, my girlfriend or my wife wants to go, but they don't know how they feel about fighting." And then after the fight's done and over with, there's like, "Oh, I love this. When's your next one?" So, yeah, anybody who says that they are not a fan of fighting or don't like it has truly never watched a fight.
Yes. And I think like I'll even talk. So my girlfriend, she's super Mormon. They don't like any violence, and
Yeah,
obviously, I'm into that kind of thing. I fight. I love fighting, and so I said just sit down. Let's watch 3 fights, and I'll break it down. And after, if you don't like it, then it is what it is, right? And they sat down, and when they sat down, I put on the Rory McDonald Robbie Lawler war. I think,
yeah,
yeah, I put on that
yeah,
war. I put on Gaichi Chandler, and then I followed up with Whaley and uh, Joanna, and I broke it down to him. And then I also played the clip of Conor McGregor hitting out Eddie Alvarez with the 6-piece combo that put him away.
yeah,
Just to add some spice. And after they saw the fights there or whatever, but after they saw Connor throw the 6-piece combo, they were into it. So, you know, you just I don't care who you are, you love fighting. Just think about it. And it stems back, like I always say. I've told Mike Murray this, I've told Cade this, I've told everyone this. We're just modern day gladiators.
yeah,
We're just gladiators in this current time. Um, you know, people have always been drawn to violence. People love the Vikings. People love the Mongols. People love, then you go to the Romans, sword fighting and killing lions and just crazy stuff. People have always been there for that. Like before the
yeah,
TV was around, you watched violence, boxing, and then boxing's like 1900s, like, violence has always been around and it's never going
yeah.
away. Murder, violence, that stuff's never going to go away.
No, no, it won't. It's something like the latter part, obviously, like the murder part. It sucks that it's a part of our lives, but that is something that it's going to continue happening, especially in today's age with technology. We hear about stuff a lot sooner, and as soon as it happens, we hear about it. It's one of the unfortunate situations of our current statehood, but it's a true reality. But fighting wise, yeah, man, that stuff's never going to go away. I mean, that's one of the things that coming in the military, because I still am in the military. So recently, we actually just taught a combatives class to a couple of mobilizing units, and at the end of it, they're supposed to go through what we call a clinch drill, which it's 4 different iterations of distance. Where me as the instructor, I have a pair of boxing gloves on, and I'm supposed to hit them, and they're supposed to neutralize the target with certain holds, right? I always ask at the beginning of every single day that we do that of like, hey, who here has never been hit before? And it's always the good majority of the class raises their hands that they've never been hit before. And that's something that back in the day, you would never see that. Everyone's been in a fist fight. Everybody's always like that. Back then, that was when it was more accepted and the way it should be, instead of resorting to some of the violence that we see nowadays of just pulling out knives, bats, guns, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like growing up in Vegas, there's not many people that are like about that life. And so I'll relate it into situations. There's one time in like 6th or 7th grade, where this kid was running his mouth and he got jumped, 6 dudes. Now, if it was the one dude he was running his mouth to, the kid would have got his ass. He would have got the ever living shit kicked out of him. But he
Yeah.
brought 6 dudes and beat him up and stabbed him and killed him.
Yeah.
That to me, that's ridiculous. And then I told my dad about it, because he grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s until now. So he was like, if there was a problem, we would just go out back and settle it. We'd fist fight. The loser loses, the winner wins. You get up, shake hands, hug it out, and move on with your life. You've settled it, right?
Yeah.
And now you just don't see that. You'll see open fire on places, people. It's ridiculous. And I think, yeah, and I think it's ultimately a mental health problem and a society problem as a whole, where people, I think with the normalization of MMA though, I think it'll decline a little bit, because MMA is just now getting accepted.
Yeah.
Like a couple of years ago, like I remember BJ Penn, Korean Zombie, all those guys were on Fremont Street in Las Vegas. And me and my mom went and got autographs. And I came home and my dad was like, "Why are you, why do you look up to those kind of guys? Blah 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 blah." And at that time I can't blame him, because I was like 7, and and so and it was still new. Like that was 11 years ago. Which 11 years ago, MMA was like very, very. It's not what it is now. It's not a sport. It was, people didn't consider it a sport. They considered it, big dumb idiots getting in a cage half naked fighting people. That's really what people considered it, right?
Yeah.
And so, with the normalization of MMA, I think you'll start seeing more fist fights. Just because I want to be like Conor McGregor, I want to be like this, I want to be like that. I think that'll help, but at the same time, I also don't feel like I think the biggest problem with guns, especially, is it's not the gun that does the damage. It's not the knife that does the damage. You can't blame the weapon, because if I wanted to kill someone, I could kill them with my bare fist. I could kill them with this microphone. I could kill them with my water bottle. If I wanted to kill someone, I can kill them with anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think what the real problem is the fact that we're not offering mental help to scale. We're not scaling mental help. It's still very new. Like it's just now where a dude can be like, dude, I want to fucking kill myself. Like I'm not happy. There's just so many different things because of this age old thing where you got to be a tough guy, and you still do have to be a tough guy, but at the same time, mental health is mental wealth. And I feel like it's just now we're starting to get to the point where we can talk about it, we can be about it, we can talk about that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's so hard to find a counselor, so hard to find a therapist, so hard to get actual help. And
Yeah.
I think that's the problem. And I also think parenting, you don't know your kids well enough to realize that they're not okay. You don't have that good of a relationship. Like I'm just 18. I graduated in December, but I've never and I've had, obviously it's normal to feel like you want to die. It's normal. But, I've never been like my mom picks up on it and she's like, all right, you're not feeling okay. What's wrong? And then, you sees it. And I feel like that's parenting as well. Because if you look at it, especially shootings wise, it's mainly kids who get bullied or kids who have gotten bullied. And eventually you're gonna break. Like you can sit there and be as mentally tough as you want, but you're either gonna end up beating the shit out of this kid or killing the kid. It depends on how mental you are, right? Some people just get pushed to the limit and snap. And then some people are more level-headed and you just want to beat the ever-living shit out of them. But ultimately, it's not a gun problem. And I posted this on my story. This guy was like, it's kind of hypocritical for people to, if someone broke into your place and you're calling the people you supposedly hate to bring what you supposedly hate to defend you. It's kind of hypocritical.
Yeah.
And so, um, yeah, and as far as school shootings go, I feel like giving teachers guns and proper tactical training is the only way that's going to get fixed. Like I said, war and violence, murder, that's always been a thing. Um, and it's never going to go away, but I feel like when you think about shooting up a school, you think about you're either trying to hurt someone that's hurt you, or you're thinking about you're just on your last leg of life and you're just going to the place where there's the most unarmed people and you'll catch them by surprise. Because
Yeah.
going to school, I haven't been to school in a couple of years. I've always been virtual, but going to school, I've never felt like, okay, this is a day I'm going to get shot at. And thankfully I haven't, but you always will catch them off guard regardless of what it is. And so I think that's the only way to fix that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'll take it even a step further. I think it's a true just systemic issue. So, because I love learning about the mind, the psychology,
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. So I came across this video back whenever I was at Wichita State University. My psychology teacher, she actually put it on. It was a guy named Dr. Zaz. He was an older, I think either a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but he talked about whenever when he got into the field, there was only 30 known mental disorders at the time, but nowadays we have like over 300. And this is also back in 2014 during this class. Now it's probably well over 350, 400. And he started actually taking it down a step further of mental disorders has this thing that we just call disorders nowadays because of we come across unwanted human behavior and then we just slap it as a disorder. And the two that he used as example, which I think he's right on, I don't believe in ADD and ADHD, especially in the classroom. And the reason for that is I think it's a failure on the educator. Because who the hell is that educator to sit there and say, oh, your child has ADD and ADHD? No. In my opinion, it's a failure on the educator's part because they are not making that personal connection with that student. I had a friend, she used to teach a fourth grade class, and she was telling me, like, yeah, I had this kid, he was always failing. And then one day she told a life story, and ever since then, like that kid's eyes perked up. He was always involved in class. He went from straight F's to A's and B's in her class and such. And I was telling him, I was like, yeah, you made that personal connection. And that's one of the things of what's cool with martial arts and such, of especially with the popularity out there, you have so many people with so many different backgrounds that it's easy to be able to make those personal connections and be able to learn from each other from that while in that school setting. They get they're only getting taught like one certain way versus trying to make that connection and actually truly being those mentors to the kids and such. And same thing with bullying. You start putting kids in martial arts, bullying is going to stop happening pretty quickly because people are going to get checked. They're going to get humbled. They're going to figure out real quick that they aren't the little badass that they think they are. And everyone's going to know how to defend themselves. And especially whenever we're talking about like suicide and such, as a young kid, my dude, I had a very shitty upbringing growing up. Uh, First starting off, like I was that ideal American class family, mother and father, they're making damn good money. And then next thing you know, my mother, she got involved with some hard drugs, had an affair on my father. He disappeared out of my life for a few years because he was so devastated with what's going on. My older brother, he turned to alcohol and drugs and used to beat the shit out of me. I remember in sixth grade, the dude thought I stole a bottle of vodka from him and broke my rib with a 2x4. Um, and it got to that point in time, it was eighth grade. I was at the lowest low point in my life. And I remember I was actually holding a gun in my hand. I was like, I was really debating on pulling that trigger. And then something just clicked. And I was like, no, I can't pick that route. Like there's much more to this than what's going on right now. So took a few years, finally, like really started getting that up going and stuff like that. But going another step further was some of us, we have that mental resilience. We're able to do it by ourselves, but other people are not. And I actually just had a friend recently. I wasn't told about it when it happened. I got told a few days afterwards, and I'm thankful, but still kind of pissed off that they waited. But I actually had a friend take his life on the day of my fight. And I was even trying to figure out like where my buddy was because we all went to the bar, had a few shots afterwards, and was talking. And I was even asking some of my buddies like, "Hey, where's T. Craig? Where's T. Craig?" And everyone was like real kind of silent. It's like, "Oh, I don't know where he's at." But reality was he committed suicide. And he was one of those guys. I mean, that dude was more excited to watch me fight than I was excited to fight. He was always the life of the party and such. But yeah, it goes in those deals where um, suicide's not the answer. And unfortunately, and this is something that I kind of wish that education would kind of take a turn for, is start educating our younger folks, especially those high school days when bullying is a real thing, and especially cyberbullying nowadays. Being able to identify some of those um, key traits of when is someone potentially suicidal and such, and kind of even going with the parents. You're absolutely, you dude, you fucking nailed it, man. Parents not knowing their own kids. um, it goes in that whole systematic issue of a lot of parents out there. They're so caught up with trying to make ends meet that they can't be there for their kid. So they really don't even know their kid. They think they do, but they really don't. So, and therefore, it's making that disconnect between that kid and the parent, where that kid doesn't even feel like that they could even talk to their own parent because they're not there for them. So they don't really feel like that they know them and such. Um, and same thing with like the whole like guns. Yes, so I actually was reading a post on my way down to Wichita, whenever I was getting some gas, and he actually brought up a pretty good point. He talked about like the purpose of some stuff. Pans are the purpose to be able to cook food on. Books are a purpose to read, and then he brought up guns. Guns are a purpose of kill, and I thought about commenting on it, but I was like, I'm just gonna hold off for wait until some people comment on it, because he's absolutely right. Yes, it is. However, though, it's also not just meant to what we think of killing each other with, but it's also meant to design for self-defense, namely one, and two is be able to provide a means providing for our family. Because there's a lot of people out there that will literally just hunt wildlife, especially like in the upper northern states. I know a few of my old military buddies that they live off the land. They don't even buy the meat at the grocery store. They will literally just hunt off the land that they have, and eating the elk, the deer, and all that kind of stuff. And that's what the sole purpose of what guns was there for, designed for back in the day, was help help with our livelihood and such. And we're seeing a lot of these people out there, they're creating violence with these weapons and such, that it's now put a huge debate out there of, do we get rid of them, do we limit them, or do we allow people to be able to have access to them and such. And it's such a hard topic to be able to discuss, because there's so many different intangible factors with it. Um, but I mean, at the end of the day, though, the going back to the historical books, I love history, especially being a military guy. The reason why the United States has never been invaded is because of our Second Amendment.
I've literally said this a million times the past 48 hours. I'm glad you brought this up.
Yeah, so because like look at World War II. The Japanese, Admiral Yamamoto, he was the guy who completely designed and spearheaded the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. And it was no shit in that movie, that Pearl Harbor movie, that they're talking about if they would invade the US, that we couldn't stop them until a certain point. From a military standpoint, that's true. However, though, the reason why the Japanese never invaded, because they thought about, they actually had invasion plans going into California and Washington and Oregon, but the reason why they never did was because they knew that they'd be fighting not just our military, but the local population, and they knew that they could not beat us because of that reason. And
Yes.
that was actually something the Japanese was planning to do if they didn't surrender, was to arm all their civilians and take after our Second Amendment right, so that way our military would have been fighting the entire civilian population. So yeah, it's like that amendment's there for a reason, and it's the reason why that we've had the security that we've been able to have from hostile nations. Um, because dude, we have not just a standing army, but we have millions and millions of that are in an army that's not in a true standing army. Your hunters during hunting season in Wisconsin alone, dude, there's like 700,000 hunters that will be up there. All of them are crack shots,
Yeah.
and they're trained on their weapons, and they teach their kids properly on weapon safety and such. I have not met one person who has been actually truly properly raised around weapons and guns, and not treat them appropriately and such, especially as a young age. I was introduced to weapons. Hell, I was fourth grade, or I was 4 years old whenever I shot my first gun, and that was the first thing my father taught me, was the safety lever, trigger discipline, and where to point the weapon at all times. And the only time it comes up is whenever I had intent on to shoot, and that it stays at the ground the entire time.
Yes.
And that's something that we should be doing a lot more of is if we have access to all of these potential tools of destruction of the training to train each other with and such. I mean, look at martial arts. We know how to be able to beat somebody, kill somebody with our bare hands in a million different ways. Like me wearing this damn top right here. I know it's not going to rip, but I know how to choke multiple people out just from doing gi jiu-jitsu all the time, just with the damn top. Same thing that even your football jersey, right? So it's like if we start allowing our younger folks to get properly trained in this, I think people will have a lot more sense of security from it, especially with the whole issue of what happened down in Texas. I mean, like it's such a tragedy. Like kids of all things, like I think if it was adults, people probably wouldn't be batting an eye. Like, yeah, it's still a tragedy, but when kids get involved in there,
It's different.
there's another sense that kind of perks up out there and shows that there's some type of urgency that needs to be talked about. But again, it goes into another issue of even police training, man. I mean, if the I don't know what report is accurate out there because I was in the gym lifting yesterday and during my lunch break, and there's three different TVs, three different news stations out there. CNN's talking about it took them over an hour to get into the school. Another news said 40 minutes, and then another source said it was like half hour or like 50 minutes or something like that. But three different reports of different timing of what's going on. I'm like, right then and there, it's already putting a black eye against the police. But I do agree though with um, in a situation like that, I get what they're doing. Their protocol is tactical training. They need to be able to understand the layout of the building, but coming from a military standpoint, obviously we don't have that luxury of under like, yeah, of course you're going to do what we call rock drills, build like some, or like we'll use like little tape or pieces of white line and we're going to construct different houses or try to as much intel that we can on of how to properly be able to execute a raid on a house. But at the end of the day, we really don't know. We just go in there. We do what we're trained to do on how first man goes left, second man goes right, third left, fourth right, et cetera, and where our areas of fire are, right? Police don't train on that kind of level of just doing it on the fly. And that was, I think, what one of the issues is if why they weren't able to go in there as quickly as they could because their handbook would not allow them to.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, do I think banning guns? No, no.
Yeah, no, I think that's the dumbest thing we can do. Um, but I'm glad you brought up the invasion because I'll kind of give some context on the story. So I was on my way to Wisconsin for my college visit, and my friend's dad who was taking us, uh, he's Air Force,
Yeah,
um, and so we were talking about it, and we were talking about guns, and we were talking about, and he was like, "That's the reason why we haven't been invaded." Because we asked like, "Do you think we'll ever be in a situation like Ukraine is?" And he was like, "Absolutely not. It's so unrealistic to plan an invasion here when you have to plan for every single person to have a gun, every single person, and it's just so unrealistic. You're outnumbered by a million, even if you bring your whole army. You're just
yeah,
going to be outnumbered." And so I'm really glad you brought that up because I've been in comment sections battling, like explaining that. I've copied and pasted the same message 10 times. And after that, a lot of people like take a step back and like that resonates. They're like, "Oh, okay, this. Okay, I get it." Um, but I think ultimately and like you said, hunters and people like that, they're they're good with guns. I
yeah,
mean, they can shoot with the best of them. You don't just shoot a deer like and just move on with your day. Like that takes practice. It takes work, and especially like older hunters, like in their 30s or 40s, who have been hunting their whole life. They're damn good.
yeah,
They're damn good with the gun, and so that's another thing. And like just think about like rednecks and stuff. Like you're not gonna get like there's just no chance. Like you might get on the coast, but then after that you're done. Like you might invade California, maybe the coast of California and around there, but you're not going to get into like Missouri. You're not going to even get that far. Or even, I don't even think you get to like Arizona. before.
Nah, especially with your home state, Nevada, right there.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that's a thing. But kind of touching on the schools, I think, and I saw a video, and it was like it simulated two situations. It was like you want to ban guns, but okay, and then he simulated a bank robbery. Everyone in the air, hands up, blah blah blah, shoots the gun. All right, now imagine that, and then everyone gets down, no one's armed. Okay, now imagine if everyone had guns. They're just like hands in the air. You get your hands in the air, and then there's 50 of them with a gun, and then the dude who tried to rob the bank looks like an idiot.
Yeah.
That's that's it. That's the same thing with a school. Nobody nobody's going to shoot up a school knowing that there's threats there. Nobody is going to shoot up a school. At least it's going to go down exponentially if they know, okay, they're just as armed as I am. The reason why you shoot up a school is because there's nobody armed, and you know that.
Right. Well, so here's the play devil's advocate on that though, is because I understand the fear of having um armed too many armed personnel there, because
True.
then it'll kind of put a fear and put a deal inside the minds of the children and such, right? So it's like I totally get that. However, though, take for example the high school I went to. I remember back in 20, I graduated in 2010. You can walk in and out at any point in time. It was like 2 years after that. I went there to be able to say hi to some of my old teachers, and I tried to open up the door. The door was locked. The front office had to buzz you in to even get
Yes.
in, and that's something that every school should be having, is a lot more sophisticated system of controlling of who comes in and who comes out, because that's the big question of how the hell did that guy get into that school with the weapon. It sound I don't know, that I haven't read enough on it, so I'm not as educated on if he just walked in through the front door and did what he did, or how exactly he got in. um what was the age of the children too, by the way?
It was like it was they were in elementary, so no larger than 10, I would think. No, 12, 10,
Yeah,
12.
so right then and there, there's an age discrepancy from the shooter itself and the victims, and those kids, like that, the shooter, he had absolutely no business of being there. Like literally, how the hell did he get into that building if the schools were a lot more controlled of who comes in and who comes out? So
True.
um, yeah, so that brings up a big question of sometimes you don't have. I don't think that we do need to arm or have more armed guards. No, having trained teachers, absolutely 100% agree with that. But the big focus is there needs to be a lot better system of controlling of who comes in and who comes out of the schools.
Yes. I
That's I think that would be more of the middle ground for both parties versus going with more armed guards. Because I actually put that up on my Facebook the other day. It was right after the school shooting. I was sarcastically saying like, "Hey, that 40 billion we just sent to Ukraine sure looks good here right now."
Right.
And that's money that could have been used to be able to invest in those schools for better security systems, locking the doors, you know what I mean, and stuff like that, and potentially even providing for training for teachers, or if they want to go that route of having true school officers inside the building and such. Because that's another thing too. Is like, yeah, I get, again, I get the fear of having too many armed guards there, but that's also a visible thing. They could be hiding off and back towards the principal's office where nobody can even see them. You're not going to have that like psychological damage of consistently seeing armed guards all over the place, of treating it like a prison. If they're kind of more, they're there as a security measure, tucked away as that last ditch effort if needed, versus being just shown and present in front of you and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so because yeah, kind of, I'm still kind of speechless on the whole thing, man. So it's a fucked up situation.
It is. And the guy killed his grandma before he went and shot up the school. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't kill anyone anyway unless they like raped my daughter. Like that's the only way. Or like raped my wife. It's the only two ways I would ever possibly think about killing someone. Um, but even if I have a lapse in judgment, like Michael Chandler would say, and and I want to kill someone, I would never be able to kill my grandma, my grandpa, anyone like that. I would never be able to. So I think just the fact that you could kill someone like that, I think just shows that mental health needs to be talked about. Like,
Absolutely.
that's a mental health problem, not a gun problem. That's it.
Yeah.
The gun doesn't shoot itself. I've been around many of guns. I've never felt in danger from a gun itself. It's the operator, not the thing. You know, that's like, and this may sound insensitive, but that's like me throwing a football, a bad pass, and me blaming it on the ball. You
Yeah.
can't. Yeah, it's not the ball's fault. I'm the one who made it go there. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So um that and the guy went through a side door. He went through a side door. Why is a side door open like that?
Right. Or
Why?
unlocked. Yeah. Yeah.
Why?
Exactly. That's the first. That's issue right there. That should never have happened. Because hell, even at my old high school, before they even had all the doors locked, they had designated because the weightlifting for our weightlifting class, there was a field house we actually did have to walk to, but majority of the doors that were side doors, they're always locked. Only way to open was from the inside. But they had designated doors that were unlocked at that point in time, and I think the system that they have now in play is um, as soon as the class is over and people got to walk in, that's the only time that they'll unlock that door. So that way the students can go in and out during that break period. But as soon as class is in session, doors locked again.
Yeah. I think also the fact the fact that teachers just having guns solves so many problems. And it's like the no, like if you know that you're going to be matched with similar firepower, you're not going to do it unless you're just batshit crazy. But then you're not losing 10 lives regardless. He walks in, maybe takes one life or does something like that, which is awful in itself. But I would rather lose one life than 10 lives.
Yeah.
Um, but you know that you're going to get shot. And like my dad's old school in Vegas, before we moved here, we he taught at Las Vegas High, and you could literally walk in and you're in the courtyard, and then you turn right, there's the office. Like, it's so open. And they had security guards, but like when I tell you, it's like as Paul Blart as it gets.
Yeah.
Like, nobody in the, like, if I could paint the picture of how that would go, it would be like in the Dark Knight when the Joker just, when he's like, "What bust?" and then he just shoots the guy. Like,
Yeah.
that's exactly how that would go. Like, I wouldn't even be scared of them. Like, what is this guy? You know? And so I think the only simple answer is maybe have retired Marines or retired veterans, give them something to do, and maybe do something like that, and give them a decent amount of money to protect the school. Fair. There's been a lot of talk of that, for sure. I agree with that. But at the same time, I don't even think it needs to go that far. Just putting the thought in someone's mind that the people at the front desk have a gun. The people, because now, like, at least at my school, you'd go in, and then you'd have to talk to the people in the front desk. You'd have to fill out a form. You'd
Yeah.
have to get your picture taken, and then they'd have to buzz you in before you could go anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, and so even if you walked in and were like, "Buzz me in, I got a gun," okay, then they have a gun too, and then you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
then
It's the threat, the
the
knowing of
threat
the
of
threat.
having it. Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Exactly. That the threat of knowing it's there does stop a lot of potential violence from happening and such. Um, but no, that's another thing too of like the overweight security officers, cops. I mean, dude, you see it all over the place. I even straight up told one police officer because he got pissed off at me. This was a couple years back. Having a few drinks and they're trying to kick us out of this bar and it wasn't time for the bar to close yet. I'm like, dude, why are you kicking us out? And he like started getting an attitude. And I'm like, dude, like, look at you. Like, you are not physically intimidating right now. Like, I could run circles around you and you would never catch me at all. And that's a big issue right there is because after, yeah, they're required to pass a physical fitness test during the academy. That's it.
But that's a joke to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Even their so-called hand-to-hand combat training
Is a
is
joke.
fucking joke behind too, and even their weapons call, because right after that, they don't have designated hours, paid hours for them to be able to, okay, hey, you know what? I'm gonna go to the range today. I'm gonna put in hours at the police academy or something like that, be able to pop some rounds down range to be able to get that weapons familiarization and such. And same thing with constantly doing jujitsu with detaining your suspects and such like that. So it's one thing that actually Wichita's done a phenomenal job on, and it's I'll give them all the credit in the world to it. Is their head uh, hand-to-hand person is a good friend of mine named Tony Figueres. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt, and so he's a very very knowledgeable person, and he teaches at the police academy of, and has actually opened up his own academy that he's opened up to a lot of his colleagues and such, and trying to invite them to be able to come in there because um, that's a big issue that you see out there is they do a little bit of that, and then too many police officers are too afraid to get their egos checked and get their ass whooped by this little 16-year-old kid who's just trained jiu-jitsu out of high school and such like that, and they think that they can take care of themselves and they can't. So they, in my opinion, they are not trained enough in escalation of force. um, yes, by all means that they have to treat everyone as a threat, because you never know who's a threat. There's plenty of situations where somebody's friendly with the cop, the next thing you know, they pull out a weapon and kill the police officer. There's a lot of examples of that happening. So the whole concept of oh, police officers are just assholes. I mean, like, when you're dealing with day-to-day threats and you're probably one of the most hated people in the city, yeah, I think you'd be an asshole too. And then something else that I personally really feel like is I do think a lot more police officers are underpaid. And so, say for example, for this, because I actually looked into going to police academy before I got hired on doing the stuff that I do now. Um, at the Wichita Police Academy at the time, you got paid $20.35 an hour. I mean, it's okay money, but so I was in college at the time, getting my degree. I was thinking about going that route, or I can go work at Target making $18 an hour. Once I'm going to be stressed, working holidays, probably will end up hating my life because everyone hates me. Or I can go work at Target, no stress, get probably more likely I'll get holidays off. If not, I'm gonna get good holiday pay, flexible hours, and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of your really good-hearted, intelligent people, they're going to pick the less stressful job because they have those opportunities out there. However, though, if you want to make more law enforcement a lot more attractive job, increase their pay. What if they're getting actually paid like 25 or $30 an hour? And this is just in Kansas, not speaking of or in Wichita, where 25 $30 an hour, you're going to live a very comfortable life here. So if you get paid that in an hour, I mean, they're making at that point in time, they're making 60 $70,000 a year. um, it's going to become a lot more attractive job for your intelligent people, your people that are actually going to make the better decisions, that critical thinking ability and such like that. So versus having some of those assholes out there that shouldn't have a badge to begin with, because we do got some of the bad apples out there. It's unfortunate deal about it. In every position out there, you're going to have your bad apples. Just police officers are a lot more publicized than other positions. Obviously, we can deal with those bad apples.
I've said the same thing. I said there's corruption everywhere you go. There's
Yeah,
corruption as high as you look, from our president all the way down to scumbags of like homeless people. There's corruption everywhere you go. The thing
yeah,
is people in that position of authority have a microscope.
yeah.
That's the only difference. And then I also offer you, okay, you think they're douchebags. You think that guy shouldn't have got killed for grabbing around his waist. Okay, answer a few questions for me. Where do you keep a gun? On your hip or in your waist? Okay, we both agree on that. Now, answer me another question. You approach a vehicle that you have no clue what this person looks like. You don't know this person's history. You don't know this person's name, age, nothing. And you're approaching them, and they get out and they do something, they run, they start fidgeting. You can't tell me you wouldn't be suspicious. Anybody would be suspicious. um and that's why I like, I like people always like if I've never been pulled over by a cop. I've talked to cops, but I've never been pulled over, put like anything. But if I were to, my hands would be here, just so you like put their mind at ease,
Yeah.
right? You're safe and they're safe by doing this, just this right here. That's it. That's all that needs to be done, and just being nice to them. Like that's the thing. If you're nice to a cop, he's gonna be nice to you. He's not like 9 times out of 10. But if you start being a dick, he's gonna be a dick back. And you got to remember who's in power here. He's the one who can write you a ticket or cuff and stuff you. He's the one. He's the one that can turn a blind eye and dump your drugs out, or the one that can throw the book at you. He's the one. And also, why not? Why wouldn't you want to put their mind at ease? Because they're at the end of the day, even if you're not suspicious, then at the end of the day, they're the reason why there's not all hell breaking loose, and they're the reason why you have the life to live and you feel somewhat safe. At least, I personally feel extremely safe, but um, you'd kind of feel silly. You'd be silly if you felt safe or unsafe and said that, you know, if cops were gone, because I remember that was a topic for a while. Defund
Yeah.
the police, no cops. Personally, I love America. I love America so much, but if that happened, I would move out. I'm gone. I'm out of this country because I'm like at that point it's a risk to me,
Yeah.
right? Um, in the same sentence though, I do feel like there is some things that we need to do for cops. I feel like cops need better training. I think they need tactical training, um, like military grade tactical training.
Uh, certain ones, yes.
Yes, to
Um,
to a certain extent.
yeah, say absolutely a lot more of the hand to hand and understanding and escalation, de-escalation drills, 100%. Because that's the thing about like, so whenever we look at military units, so me on the reserves, whenever I deployed to Afghanistan, we spent 3 months training for a 8 month deployment. A lot of those police officers, they're spending like 3 or 4 months in the police academy, and then they're expected to be the experts at their job,
Right.
which 3 to 4 months is not enough time to be an expert at your position. It takes a lot longer than that. You look at Navy SEALs, they will train like 2 years just for a 6 month deployment, for them to be able to execute at the precision that they execute and such. So I absolutely, police officers need a lot more training out there, but they need to be provided those opportunities for training versus just being expected 10 hours on the job, clock in, clock out, just like that. Like, no, again, if you increase their pay, it'll become a lot more attractable job. I think you'll have a lot more people on the police force, which then will open up the opportunities of like, hey, you want some paid hours to be able to go do jiu-jitsu at this gym. Guess what? We pay for your membership. They're going to be a lot more confident in their hand-to-hand combat and being able to detain somebody than especially like say you see so there's a gal that I know on the Wichita police force, little itty bitty girl, dude. She's probably like 90 pounds, named Lillian Garcia. Like, you can't tell me that she's going to confidently be able to defend herself without going to jiu-jitsu constantly against your average weighted male.
Right.
Um, and but that also comes in those deals of knowing when that you need the escalation of force, and plus two of getting you or giving you enough knowledge to be able to keep you alive in those really bad scenarios to allow your partner to be able to get there and not have to sit there and take multiple lives in order to be able to stay alive. Sometimes, yes, circumstances, situations will arise to that where you do have to take a life as an officer. Um, but there's other circumstances that doesn't need to happen. So, say for example, that incident that we had before all those riots. In my opinion, why the hell were they there for that long? Like when we were doing our detainee operations over in Afghanistan, because it's a hostile environment, as soon as you have them detained, you get the fuck out of there. You don't need to be hanging out in a hostile environment and such, dwindling around. No, like there's just so many things that wrong that happened with there, which defunding them, I do truly believe is the wrong answer. However, though, I think it is the opportunity to be able to look at it and try to fix a lot of the issues with our current system of what we have. And they're like, hey, you know what? We've been content with our current system. We need to start improving it, because same thing with just like what we're talking about fighting earlier. Of even when you're winning, that whole saying of "don't fix if it ain't broke," that's bullshit.
That
We need
is.
to constantly be reinventing the wheel and looking for improvements in every single aspect out there, whether it's from law enforcement, education, um, how working out, fighting, all that kind of stuff. Like we have to constantly reinvent the wheel of how to make us a better person than we were yesterday and look to how I can become a better person tomorrow than I am today type situation.
I
So
agree. I think working out is a good example of that. If you lift the same weights every day for a year, you're gonna see exponential growth in the first 6 weeks, and
yeah,
then after that you're just gonna cruise. Um, and I think that's the same thing. If you do the same thing every day, if you don't recognize, because at the end of the day, no one's perfect, nothing's perfect. As much as you want it to be, nothing is perfect. There's
yeah,
al- there's always going to be a president that someone doesn't like. There's
yeah,
always going to be um nothing's ever going to be perfect. And so to realize, I think it takes self-awareness to understand, you know, first of all, I agree. Police, first responders should get paid a lot more money for what they do. Running into burning buildings, being the first responder to a call, or saving lives as a paramedic, all three of them, they deserve way more money than they get. They're the real heroes of America, right? Not LeBron James, not Tom Brady, but those kinds of guys, and the military as well. Um, like they're the ones who protect you, you know.
Hell,
So,
even firefighters are usually on scene a lot quicker than your paramedics and your police officers and
for
stuff like that.
sure,
They're not
exactly.
training and such, but kind of like reinventing that will deal. Like speaking of like working out, like not even just doing the same thing over and over again. You're not only does your body become stagnant, but your body can't do the same thing over and over again over time. As you get older, I'm not going to be able to like squat over 350 pounds or something like that. I just physically can't do it.
Yeah,
You have to adapt, learn, and how to still keep your body strong while keeping your body healthy. Same thing with what we're seeing nowadays, because back whenever when we started dealing with a lot more, especially in the Midwest demographically, ethnically has been more on one side than the other. Now we're seeing more and more population happening, a lot more mixture of that true melting pot of what is so great about the United States of all the different cultures coming together. Um, because that's one thing that we learn in business is how to deal with the different cultures, courtesies, and such. And that's one thing that would help be able to, I think, of understanding situations, of understanding the cultures, of getting trained up on all that kind of stuff, especially with your first responders. Because I mean, look at our languages. Spanish is becoming a lot more common wherever you go, of trying to speak Spanish and such. So as the culture or as time goes on, we need to be aware of our surroundings of health, fitness, who we're interacting with, and knowing those different culture stuff. Because that's one thing that I know for a fact no organization spends enough time on of understanding those uh, courtesies from the different cultures and such.
right.
Say, for example, while I was over in the Middle East, man, we went to Qatar, and they straight up told us, like, "Hey, whatever you do, do not shake with your left hand." I'm all like, "Why? Like, I'm right-handed, so it's not going to be a problem for me. But like, why do I need? Why can't I shake with my left hand?" Well, reality is because they look at it as a sign of disrespect because that's the hand you wipe your ass with. So they don't want you to sit there, shake your hand that you wipe your ass with and stuff like that. So it's truly disrespectful. And they even straight up told us like, hey, they will put you on the first flight out of this country if you do that. But situations like that though, of we're not really taught that of understanding stuff. Same thing like say if I go over to your house and you invite me over for dinner. I don't know if your family is a praying type where they want to say grace right before we eat and stuff like that. So some people find it disrespectful of eating food right as soon as you get your food versus waiting until everybody's there collectively to be able to eat your food. So that's like little traditions like that go a long way with establishing a healthy relationship from law enforcement, coach, mentor, peers, colleagues, et cetera, et cetera. So
I agree, and I also think being able to read the room is huge.
yeah,
Cause like I'll just use the saying grace thing. If I'm going to your house and and you just dig right in, then I can assume that that's not a thing. But if, people look hesitant and you always like everyone like looks around like, all right, everyone ready? You know what I mean? Like that kind of look, then it's like, all right, I know this. And I think you have to be able to read the room in order to do anything. Um, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing ever. And yeah, it's just being self-aware. It boils down to being self-aware. Like every problem that we have in this world, it seems like, whether it's from school shootings to adapting to everything else, it's all self-awareness. If that dude was more self-aware that I'm not mentally okay, I need help, then those 19 people wouldn't have died, and 20 counting his grandma, right?
Yeah.
Those 19 people wouldn't have died. If we're more self-aware about, if Joe Biden was more self-aware about political issues and the feedback he's getting from the public, then 90% of the problems we have would not be there, right? Especially when you're in a leadership role, you kind of gotta, I mean, don't take it to the bank, but listen and collect others' opinions, right? Because you make decisions for our country, and that's kind of what we were born on as a country, is we all collectively make a decision going forward,
Yeah.
right? That's what our rights are there for. That's what our amendments are there for. That's what the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence is all there for. That's all there for. It all comes together, ties it up in a bow. That's what that's there for, right? Um, and so I think we're kind of losing sight of that as we're moving forward. And then you can also scale it to your coach, your MMA coach. He's not recognizing that you suck at wrestling. So instead of putting you in those uncomfortable situations and doing that, they're kind of like, all right, well, you can strike, so let's just keep striking and keep striking. Well, what happens when you fight a wrestler? You can't run from them forever, especially if you want to make it in the sport. You can't run from wrestlers, or you can't run from any specific style. You're always going to run into one. So then you can take it as that, or just your parents. Your parents realize that you're not a kid who responsible to getting spanked and yelled at. You're more of like a, let's sit down and talk about this and realize why you did it and why this is wrong. You're more of a logical thinker than a violence thinker. All right,
Yeah.
that's fine. Then we got to adapt. And maybe that's not how you were raised, right? Maybe you can say, oh, I'd take it easy on you. I was getting hit with pots and pans and belts and everything like that. But at the end of the day, that's how you learn. Your kid may not learn the same, right? So you can look at it from the top to the bottom. You always have to read the room. You have to be self-aware. And if everyone was self-aware, even 50% more than what they are, then 90% of our problems would either go away completely or slow down completely. And I
Yeah.
think, and then you always bring up school shooting numbers. I think America is so weird because in Russia and those kinds of places, there's respect. You see somebody and you respect them. You whether it's you only shake with your right hand, things like that. That's respect. You know, there's just so much respect, and I think America is one country that lacks respect as a majority. Uh, I don't think there's many people now, especially going forward, like my generation. Oh my God, there's so many people who don't respect, don't understand, ignorant. It's just hard to um it's just respect is a big thing, and I think that's also a thing that really holds us back.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like you know the of the respect of, but that kind of ties back into two topics that we kind of mentioned about earlier. Was for one is that personal connection out there. If you have that personal connection, whether if you're in a leadership position, a coaching position, all that kind of stuff. Because if you look at some of the best coaches in MMA, they know how to adapt to the fighter. Like one of the things I loved watching Greg Jackson back in the day, he had John Jones and Carlos Condit on the same card. He's
Yep.
fucking yelling at Carlos Condit in his face, like, this is war. I need you get in there, fucking blah, 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 blah. And then he's like, next, John Jones like, hey, find your waterfall, big, deep breath. And same thing with leaderships. Good leaders know how to adapt their style. Some people, they need to be told step by step on how to do stuff. Other ones, they have a lot better thinking process where you can go more that laissez-faire kind of style of leadership. And basically you tell them like, hey, this is the goal. You do you. run with it, get it done.
Exactly.
Because they're competent enough to be able to get that done. But America is so unique for the fact of, I love whenever when people bring up like healthcare and some of the other issues that we have, and they start talking about some of the Western European countries and how well they're doing with their statistics. Well, the biggest difference between that country and the United States is demographically, we are not the same. They are predominantly typically one ethnic group for the majority of it, while we have so many here, and because of that, it goes in those cultural differences of not respecting each other, and that's what creates a lot of issues out there of not being able to respect and understanding each other, being able to make that personal connection of realizing when somebody's not there fully mentally. Because if we have that respect and we have that connection, you're absolutely right. A lot of those problems out there on the social level will be resolved pretty quickly, in my opinion. Because then people are going to be able like, hey man, like you're not doing so right, all right today. Like like we got a guy named Mike Breeden up at Glory MMA Fitness on Northland, right? Big old guy. He's a fucking teddy bear, dude. He's like the soul of our gym. Like when he's not there, something feels off. And so I was joking around with Zach over the weekend. Whenever when he was cornering his guys out in Springfield, Mike wasn't there Thursday. He wasn't there Saturday morning. Didn't show up to open mat, and he wasn't there on Monday. So I was joking around with my coach, like, "Hey man," I was like, "Dude, I haven't seen Mike since last Wednesday. Like, did he go home or something? Because his family's from New York." And he was like, "No, not that I know of." And we were literally talking about how we were about to send him a text message, but like, "Hey, you all right, man? What's going on?" Because we knew that he's typically in the gym every single day and such. But that goes in that personal connection, that respect of we've gotten to know each other, and we know when something's potentially off. That we have that ability to be able to reach out and make sure things are all right.
Yeah, and I think a cool thing about MMA, I talked to AJ Fletcher about this. Cool thing about MMA is it doesn't matter what language you speak. When you step on that mat, you both know what you're about.
Bro,
Like
yeah, yeah,
you don't have to speak, you don't have to talk, but whether you speak Portuguese and I speak English, or you speak Russian and whatever, when you step on that mat, you automatically know what we're about. You you speak through movement, not words, if that makes sense. And I think
yep,
that's the
absolutely.
biggest
So cool thing that you brought that up, man. The first year I got into martial arts, at the very first gym I was at, Fox Fitness, they brought in a guy named Leo Macaco. Macaco stands for monkey in Portuguese. Um, he did not speak any English at all, but he was able to teach every single jiu-jitsu class because movement is a language. So like he would literally just do something with his hand to indicate like, hey, this is what we need to pay attention to without even have to speak and such. But with that being said, though, he did actually learn a little bit of English for the 2 weeks that he was here for. He learned how to say Oreos, Dylan's, because that was a grocery store, and as sad as it is to say, but he also learned the word Jezebel's, which is a strip club.
hmm
So yeah, so anytime he would always say, or he would just always chuckle while we're rolling around things like Jezebels, and I was like, dude, get that out of your mind, man. Uh, but yeah, dude, that's the cool thing about martial arts is it shows you that human movement is a language. You can, and that goes into deal with what we're talking about too. Of you can tell when somebody's off by just watching them, the way how they move. They're standing. Do they have their head up high? If their head is up high, you know that they're probably confident that their life's going good. But if their head's kind of always looking down, slumped down, something's probably dragging that day and such like that. And that's something that we should be a lot more educated on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're open, then that you're a lot more likely to connect with somebody.
Yeah.
Like if you're open, you use your hand, you're talking, you're a lot more open to connecting with somebody than if you're slouched down like this, and even like this, you automatically subconsciously don't connect. But when you're like this and you're talking, laughing, having a good time, then you connect with people, and that's important.
Yeah, there's a TED talk out there. So on the Army Reserve side, what I do now is I'm a career counselor. So I'm a salesman for reenlistments, right? So my area leader, he had me watch this TED talk on human movement, and it was sitting there talking about getting the bodies in sync with each other. So you doing this kind of brought it up. Whenever somebody's doing this, you should automatically know that they're cut off. Like they don't care what you have to say. So what we're taught is to be able to try to get that personal connection with them. We mimic their movement. We'll kind of sit there for a little bit and then we'll kind of move. You will know when your body's in sync because they will start doing the exact same thing your body's doing subconsciously without even thinking about it.
Yeah. That I think, and that's like another thing, that mind is so weird, and I think that's why I'm so intrigued about it. Like if I don't end up, well, I know I won't play in the NFL, but if I don't end up fighting, if I don't end up anything, I want to be a doctor. And I think that's what really drew me into being wanting to be a doctor and loving the human body, is because it's so unique and the mind is so unique. Like humans are not put on this planet to fight other humans, but with proper training, you condition your shins, you condition your knuckles, and then all of a sudden you condition your body, and now you're ready to fight. Now you're conditioned to get into a fist fight.
Yeah.
And or that's like really what drew me into wanting to be a medical in the medical field. And the mind, it's crazy how you can read somebody's actions and automatically have a good estimate of what they're thinking.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I think, like, if they're, just their tone of their voice, the words that they're using, if they're, and if they're talking too much, like I found if you talk too much, like obviously not in this setting, but like if you're talking to an extremely amount of people and you're talking your ear off, that typically means you're a little insecure. Or if you're talking a little too much about yourself, especially, that typically means you're insecure and you just want someone to accept you,
Yeah.
right? Whereas if you're too reserved, that means, and you don't talk too much, that typically means that, you're trying to feel people out, before you're reserved. You're extremely reserved. You're not insecure about anything. And if you are, it's like very minor things. You're just trying to feel people out. You maybe have had trust issues in the past. Someone's, betrayed you, and someone you never thought would betray you, right? And so by the way people talk, the way they move, it's just very unique on how you can kind of get a good estimate on what they are. Even sometimes their past, like you can get a good guess on like if they've had a rough upbringing or a good upbringing or a medium upbringing. And so it's weird how you can gauge that based off of actions, words, and movements.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would definitely say more so with actions out there, because like if you look at where I'm at in my life nowadays, you would never guess that I had the upbringing that I have now. However, though, I always try to be mindful of everybody that, and thankfully martial arts has taught me this too, of always try to be that nice person. So it's kind of like why my cage name's Mr. Hyde, because even in the training room, I'm always trying to take care of my training partner. I don't have my ego where I'm gonna pick you up, slam you, try to hurt you. Nah, man, Dr. Jekyll all day. I'm there to try to help you out. I love seeing people succeed because I've been at the bottom myself. I want to see people rise up to their full potential. But then obviously then you have that Mr. Hyde guy. That's when he goes in there, he does his thing, little vessel of violence. Um, but dude, you're spot on, because I'm the kind of that way. I'm pretty reserved, but it's also because I'm an analytical person.
Exactly.
Say I need to read the room so that way I know my surroundings and know my audience of who I'm around, so that way can I be a lot more open with what I say. Do I need to kind of control what I say? Do I need to watch somebody, kind of see what their actions are, or do I have any potential threats and stuff like that? So
Yeah, for sure. And also I always tell the story because like my sister, she's super young and she's like really into the whole like gender pronouns, fat shaming, kind of like that kind of thing, where I'm more of like a David Goggins kind of guy. Like if you tell me I'm fat, I'm probably fucking fat. Like you don't just say that for no reason.
yeah.
Um so two polar opposites. But um but she always blames like upbringings, like if she like talks to an unfortunate kid, and I'm kind of really reserved, and so I'm judgmental in the way that I'm not going to let you into my circle unless I know that you're gonna make me a better human, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm the product of everyone I surround myself with. So if I surround myself with losers, I'm going to be a loser. If I
Yeah.
surround myself with winners, I'm going to be a winner. And so I'm very judgmental when I'm picking my friends and people who I hang out with religiously. That being said, when she always brings up that topic, this is the story I always tell, and I saw it on some motivational Instagram page, and it really resonates. So there's two sons of an alcoholic dad. One son takes that as motivation to do better,
Yep.
and uses it as okay, this is exactly what I don't want to be like. And then the other son says, this is I'm the way I am because my dad was an alcoholic, and uses it as an excuse. Which one do you want to be? Do you want to be on the loser side or the winner side? And that resonates with me because my biological dad is not in my life. Have never met him. He's a drug addict. He just got busted a couple of weeks ago for stealing $2,000 worth of sports cards from a Walmart.
Shit.
How does that happen? I don't know. I really don't know. But I gave him so much shit for it on Instagram and Facebook. But this really resonated with me. I could either be a douchebag like that and shove needles into my arm, or I can make that, I can use it as, I don't want to be like that fucking guy.
Yeah, dude, that's literally my brother and I. My brother, so him and I were polar opposite from each other. I've got a successful life. He still lives at home with mother and doesn't have a job and plays video games all night and drink and sleeps during the day. So, and him and I were product of the same type of environment growing up, but we made that decision like, do I want to continue being this product of this environment, or do I want to be better than it? Um, yeah, I know the story you're talking about. I've heard it a couple times. I was like, dude, that resonates with me a lot. There's another one out there, a book I've been meaning to read called Rich Dad Poor Dad.
I love that book. It's a great read. Read it.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about it. One of my friends' dad, he's a very successful businessman. That's who he recommended that book for me, because you're absolutely right. You are a product of your environment. Whether if you want to be a fighter, you surround yourself with fighters. If you want to be successful in life, you surround yourself with other successful people. And that's one thing that I did early on was I cut out the toxic people in my life. I started surrounding myself against those with successful and fighters alike. So one of my guys, that one of the things I love about jiu-jitsu, his name's Nick Barons. I'd never known how successful this man is. I've known him for 10 years until like the last 2 or 3 years of my life, or that of us two knowing each other. He's a headhunter on an international level. Dude's got fucking millions of dollars. Never even knew it. He doesn't flaunt it around. But anyways, though, but learning kind of more about that. Anytime I have like a financial question or anything, I always hit him up like, hey man, what do you think about this? Or hey, I'm thinking about investing in this, blah, blah, blah. So he's been like a life coach to me. Same thing with my friend Jim's dad, Joe Nowak. He built Nowak Construction up from the ground up. Dude has not had to pay or use a credit card or take out a loan in the last 30 years of his life. Everything's been paid for in cash. So like, hey, he's fucking successful. I'm gonna bounce some questions off of him, and that was actually who recommended me that Rich Dad Poor Dad and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, hey, like, where'd you get your mind at? And that's the thing I'm trying to do with myself is like, hey, you read these kind of books? Okay, let me figure out how you got to your mindset by reading those books too. Maybe then I can get on that same wavelength.
I could not agree more. And there's a quote in Rich Dad Poor Dad that was like, the rich teach their kids how to invest money, make money, save money, and the poor, they don't get that. They don't get how to invest and stuff. And that's really significant. I had a thought too, but the thing is also constantly learning. So you gotta be humble enough to realize, and this is where martial arts again ties into it. You're never going to be the best mixed martial artist in the world. Even Kamaru Usman, there's someone somewhere that would beat him, right? Yeah. So and it's just humbling because you're never going to be. No one's number one, because even the number one guy, there's someone that could catch him, right? Yeah. And different disciplines too. And so that's the same thing in fighting life and everything. You're never going to be number one in life. It's impossible. There's too many people. But being able to evolve and constantly grow is the only thing. And my high school football coach always told me, you shoot for perfection, and somewhere along striving for perfection, you'll find yourself being excellent. You'll find excellence. And as long as you find excellence, you'll be doing pretty damn good for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's always like kind of hit me too, because it kind of made me realize that I'm not going to be excellent. It's impossible. Or I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to be excellent. It's impossible to be perfect. You're always going to be flawed somewhere. And
Yeah.
so, being self-aware and humble is the biggest thing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's kind of Zach said something to me before my fight that's been really resonating with me and still sticks with me ever since. He talked about earning it. So he was going to text me kind of to see where I was at mentally and stuff like that. And then after that, he left off. It's like, hey man, it's like, no, regardless of what happens Saturday night, so like, you earned the right to be there. You put in the work, you made the weight, you trained your ass off, so you earned it. And I actually made like an Instagram post a while back of talking about that, of using that mentality in every aspect of your life. Like, if you want to be successful, earn it. Don't look for a handout. You're tired of struggling, earn a better life. You want to be better at something, you got to earn it. Well, if you want to be smarter, you need to study. You want to be faster in running, you need to run more. You want to be stronger, you need to lift more. Like, you got to put in the work and you got to earn it.
Yeah, for sure. So I have one last question, and I ask every fighter. Would you rather knock somebody unconscious, Tony Ferguson faceplant, choke somebody out or break a limb, or 50 to 44 them?
I think I would get more satisfaction with submitting them.
I agree.
So, because as a fighter, I'm there. I want to break you mentally. If I knock you out, you have the opportunity to walk away saying, "Oh, I went out on my shield. I got knocked out." If I make you tap, you quit. You mentally broke. And to me,
Exactly.
there's nothing more satisfying than getting somebody to tap, because then it's like, hey, you can't say that, oh, if I didn't get knocked out, I could have done this, blah, 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 blah. No, you broke, you quit.
Yeah, I agree. And I always say it's subjective though. I don't think I would want to knock somebody out. Well, first of all, maybe, because it's such an adrenaline dump.
Yeah, it is.
You're just like, you get a highlight reel. You're just, you know, it's sick, right? So I feel like there's always room for a knockout. But there's two options for me. If I hate you, I want a 50-40 for you. I want to take you all 5 rounds and make you pay.
Yeah.
Like, I want to hold you there and I want to make you pay. And if you verbally tap, you verbally tap, but I'm making you pay for 5 rounds, 5-minute rounds. And you are going to pay for everything I hate you for. And I'm going to remember that every time I rain hellfire onto you. Like, dude, I'm going to make you pay. If it's some random Joe Schmo that I don't even know, then I want to make you quit. I just want to have that satisfaction of, I made you quit. You quit because of me. You quit because you could not take the pain. You could not take whatever it is, and you tapped out. Yeah, I think that's the only other way. And then I guess another question is, me and my mom always talk about this, because she's like kind of the person where it's like, I don't know why you'd want to fight someone you've never met before. And I always say, I would rather fight someone I've never met before than someone I've met before and I hate or like.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I would always want to fight somebody I don't know, because then, to me, I'm fighting myself. That's the only person I have to fight. If I have to fight somebody I know, I'm fighting somebody more than just myself.
Yeah, I agree. And not to mention, if you think about it, someone you like,
Yeah.
You get them wobbled, you're not going to put them away. You're not going to Dan Hendo them, give them an extra super necessary. You're not going to super necessary them.
Yeah.
And which ultimately might lose you the fight, right?
Yeah.
Contrary to that, if we flip the script, if you hate someone you're gonna go in there, guns blazing, overthrowing looping punches, you know, and that's not necessarily a recipe for success either. So personally, I would rather fight someone I've never met before, just because I have no loyalty to the guy or I have no feelings for the guy.
Yeah.
If I put you unconscious, I don't feel bad, and if I put you, I won't feel like I have to throw looping punches and take out anger on you.
Yeah, I think if I got to fight somebody I hated, I actually would enjoy it a little bit more because I like the more pressure there is, I perform better.
Yes, I
Um,
agree.
so I think I would much rather fight somebody I hate just so that way I would get the satisfaction of them knowing during the fight they're not going to get me overexerting emotionally. I'm still going to be tactful. I'm still going to be fully aware of what I'm doing. And that's the thing of what separates some of the best guys out there. Say Garbrandt versus Dillashaw, the
Or
best
there's
example
Connor.
you can have of that. So they both hate each other. And look at what Dillashaw was able to do. He stuck to his game plan and made Cody fight an emotional fight, and Cody got knocked out twice.
Yeah, or Khabib and Connor. I mean,
Yeah,
Khabib hates that guy. There's never going to be a day where Khabib and Connor are friends.
yeah,
Even with 60 on their death, or not 60, but like 80 on their deathbed,
yeah,
they're not gonna, the Khabib's last words might be "fuck Conor McGregor." Like, that's
yeah,
how bad they hate each other. And Khabib didn't throw looping punches. Khabib dropped him, but Khabib went in there, did exactly what he's supposed to do.
yeah,
Um, manhandled him. And I think that's how I would be too, because I'm just not emotional. Like, especially in a fist fight, you can't be emotional. That's just a recipe for disaster.
yeah,
Emotional or not, or know him or not. I mean, so yeah, I feel like, yeah, there's pros and cons, but I feel like if I was fighting a guy that I hated, my goal would to be wrestle fuck him for 5 rounds like Colby Covington did Masvidal,
yeah.
and just make him know who his daddy is.
See, I think if it was somebody I truly, truly hate, honestly, I wouldn't mind having that back and forth war and then making them quit. Just so that way then they got the tease of, oh, I'm gonna do it, and then no, they quit.
Yeah. Yeah, um, that that's valid. But playing devil's advocate, then if you're back and forth, then you give them the satisfaction of saying, "I was almost there." I went to war with you. Just think of it like if you get into a war like Colby Covington and Usman, Colby always has that. I was there. I should have won that fight, right? And whereas if you just go in there, handle business, 50-40 for them, or make them quit, ideally, that's ideal. Um, even if I hated them, putting their lights out and watching them faceplant and making them live with that guilt and embarrassment for the rest of their life, like getting knocked out by someone you've never met before, or someone you're cool with, whatever. It
Yeah,
happens to the best of us. But just imagine what you'd live with if someone you hated put your lights out in front of your family, your wife and kids.
yeah,
You know, that's also maybe a time where a highlight reel knockout would come into play.
yeah. That's where, gosh, that guy who got knocked out, Kamzat was cracking me up. He tweeted, "Hey, if you guys want to get absolutely sloshed tonight, take a shot every time they show me getting knocked out." I'm all like, dude, like, kudos to you for roasting yourself. You're like I'd have a beer with you. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, anybody who talks shit to you about getting knocked out, first of all, would never step foot in the gym.
Yeah,
And secondly, if they did, they'd get beat up. And it's like Derek Lewis did this after he got knocked out one of those times. He made people like, he was like, open invitation, come to the gym, sign a waiver, and we can fight. So
yeah,
like a few people did it, and no one left conscious.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah,
Uh, Jay, I heard a couple stories up at Glory by Zach and a few others that the Northland used to be right beside a bar, and James just happened to be there. And there's a couple of drunk guys that were walked in, like talking a bunch of shit, and apparently, like James is just sitting there at the front desk on his phone, and then next thing you know, after like 10 minutes, throws his phone down. I was like, "All right, sign the waiver. I'll spar you," and then just totally beats the dude's ass.
yeah. I mean, James is not a guy I'd want to fuck with.
No, no, dude, I fucking love James to death. Like he hit The first time I ever met him and Zach was in 2016. I have fought two Glory guys prior to joining Glory. Both of them are split decision losses. So I was like, why not join the team that knows how to beat me?
Right.
So, but I've known James for a long time, and he's been talking to me about trying to come up there for the longest time. And the thing of what I respect about James the most is he does not like toxicity within his environment. There's been a few guys that have tried to come to Glory and train, and he told them to fuck off. You are not allowed in my gym. And prior to me moving up there, I actually reached out to James of like, hey man, do you mind if I join the gym? I know you're particular on who joins. Dude, he was more than welcoming. And unfortunately, I don't get to go to his location that often. But as soon as I stepped foot in Zach's gym, Zach texted him, was like, hey, guess who just joined? And James was like, dude, fuck yes. About goddamn time.
Yeah. I mean, Lee Summit is a hike because I'm in Liberty, Missouri,
Yeah.
and Lee Summit is a hike.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm all the way up in Zona Rosa, so I go to the Gladstone location more often than not. But when I get the opportunity to, I go to Lee Summit and train with all the savages there because,
yeah, killers.
dude, absolute like it's awesome to see them the success that they've had from building that gym out of nothing.
Right.
So especially in the short time frame that they've done it in, it just shows you just how good the people that support them and how well that coaching staff is and the seed and people that they're able to bring in. Because I mean, hell, dude, they got fucking Brandon Moreno there now too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. I enjoyed our conversation. We actually ran 2 hours.
Yeah, we did. Appreciate you having me, man. It was very fun talking to you. So
Can you hear me?
yeah,
Oh, but yeah, we ran 2 hours. Uh, you're definitely my kind of guy. Let's definitely stay in touch. I enjoyed our conversation. We engaged in a lot of good conversation.
yeah, absolutely, man. I'd love to be able to come back on at any time. So
Yeah, when do you want to fight next?
we're working on that. So I told Zach I want to get at least 3 or 4 more fights in before year's end. I know I'm getting there in my career where he wants me big fights only, so that way I can get to the UFC. So I told him, I was like, hey man, I was like, I don't care who it is, when it is. If you like the opponent and you like the date, I'll just let you know if I have any conflicts on the military side. If not, don't even ask me, accept the fight. So I got the right kind of leadership. So we're looking at potentially, hopefully, sometime end of July. If not, we'll see. Like we're staying ready for anything. So if I don't get anything confirmed for end of July, I'm definitely going to try to stay ready for if anybody falls out on the FAC card. So that way, if they need a replacement guy, I'm like, hey, guess what? I'm ready. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, do you have any fighter merch?
I do. Send me your address. I'll send you a couple shirts.
Sounds good. I was gonna pay for it, but
Nah, dude, I've already made my money back. I got a good career outside of fighting. So I'm at that point in time. Exposure's exposure, dude. I like people seeing support me and stuff like that. So yeah, send me your address. I'll send you some shirts.
sounds good to me. Like I said, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. And when you get a date settled, let's let's have you back on and talk about that. And I'm sure there'll be some good fights to talk about. Until then, I mean, we got International Fight Week in the beginning of July. It's going to be an amazing card.
Yes.
Fights, and then even June 11th, Glover and Yuri. That's going to be a good card. Valentina Shevchenko.
Go watch the boxing event that day too.
Oh yeah, boxing, and then there's boxing this weekend too. Tank. That's gonna
Yeah.
be a good fight. So yeah, we'll have definitely a lot of fights to talk about. But yeah, when you get a date, let's have you back on and talk about it and talk shop.
Sounds good, brother. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you.